Hey everybody, it is You Had to Ask, the show where I answer your questions. And this week, my first question comes from Bushbasher85, who says, "Hey Steve, I'm one of those smart-ass atheists who loves chick tracts, and I love them for all the reasons that Jack Chick did not intend. However, I'm also old school about it. I like holding the tract in my hands, and don't want to go to Chick's website to read them. Therefore, I've been collecting them. I work as a supervisor at a grocery store, and there's a Baptist church who occasionally hands them out to us. The problem, though, is that I want a bigger collection to ironically enjoy, but I don't want to give Jack Chick money for them. Nor do I want to go to that church to get some. What should I do to expand my collection so I don't have to give Jack Chick jack shit?" If you don't want to buy them directly from Chick publications and you don't want to have to go to that church to get some, the only thing I could suggest that maybe you haven't tried is there might be people online who sell them. Maybe there's an eBay seller who sells Chick tracts, like used secondhand, so that the money won't find its way back to Jack Chick. That's the only thing I can think of. I occasionally have people ask me when I do the An Atheist Reads videos if I pay for the books. And the answer for the most part is that I do. I buy the books. I lately, the last couple of years, I've been doing them using Kindle versions. And I buy the Kindle version of the books. Sometimes I suppose I feel conflicted about it because I think, well, I'm buying this book, I'm supporting this author, even though they're doing something I can't support, I don't believe in. But then there's another side of that, which is I am using the book. I am reading the book, and I'm countering it. I'm doing critical analysis of it and arguing against the points that it makes, but I'm using the book. And if I'm going to use the book, I think it's only fair, especially if I'm going to use a new copy of the book, because in the past when I've used physical copies of the book, I do sometimes try to find a used copy of that. But if I'm using the electronic version, it's always a new version, you know. And if I'm doing that, I do sort of owe it to the author and to the publisher to pay for that service, to pay for that product. I completely understand not wanting to spend the money to buy Chick tracts because you don't want to support that, because I wouldn't want to do that either. But if you like the tracts, even if you like them for reasons that Jack Chick would never have intended, maybe it's okay to pay for the product that you are then going to enjoy. Ezra Henderson: "Hey Steve, in the English language there is a lack of gender-neutral pronouns. I know there is a push for they to be a singular neutral pronoun. I don't think that would catch on because it's traditionally a plural pronoun. Should a new pronoun be made for our language? If so, is it a job of the LGBTQ community? Also, do you have any suggestions? I think herm is a good idea because of the word hermaphrodite. Thanks, Steve. I always enjoy your show." The problem is not, I think, that there is a lack of gender-neutral pronouns. It's that in a way there are too many. There are actually lots and lots of proposed gender-neutral pronouns, and there is a lack of consensus among people who advocate for their usage as to which ones would be the best ones to use. The ones that I see used or proposed the most often are Z, ZE, and here, HIR, but pronounced here, Z and here for gender-neutral pronouns instead of he or she or his or hers. And I think those are pretty good. And there are plenty of other ones. I can't say that those are the most commonly or the universally agreed upon pronouns, but I do see them proposed and used by a lot of people. So I think it's just a matter of raising awareness and of reaching a consensus as to what these gender-neutral pronouns are going to be, and raising awareness and convincing people of the importance of using them. Mechanical Menace: "Why are negative views regarding feminism always the fault of others and never the fault of the particular group of self-proclaimed feminists who project the bad image? Why don't any feminists, including yourself, call them out like the atheist community does with folks like Pat Condell, Thunderfoot, or even Dawkins when he comes out with something totally idiotic?" That is a very fair point, but I would suggest that the feminist community does do that. It just is a matter of disagreeing over what constitutes projecting a bad image of feminism. A lot of people on the internet who are anti-feminists, who talk about people who identify as feminists giving feminism a bad name, they usually wind up talking about people like Anita Sarkeesian, who is nowhere near what I would call an extremist, fundamentalist feminist giving feminism a bad name. Not within a million miles of that. So one of the main reasons why you don't see a lot of feminists speaking out against people like her, or people who many of the anti-feminists would describe as, being bad feminists, or feminists giving the movement a bad name, is because they just disagree that that's what they are and that's what they're doing. There is, among the anti-feminist folks, what most of us think of as an incredibly warped view of what feminism is and what feminism ought to be, and the state of gender inequality in society in general. But there are feminists who speak out against other feminists that they consider problematic or troubling a lot. I mean, I know quite a few feminists who speak out and argue against the views and the values expressed by someone like Christina Hoff Sommers. That's not uncommon at all. There are feminists, many feminists, who take the opportunity to speak out against trans-exclusionary radical feminists because they think that is a very negative portion of their movement, and they think it would benefit feminism as a whole if that form of feminism was sort of pushed to the side and kept out of the mainstream. So it depends on what you're talking about. It depends on what point of view you're looking at it from. Practical Magic 9. To the rest of Gotham and the world, Batman is a vigilante. However, he worked in concert, unbeknownst to all but a few, with the GCPD. Commissioner Gordon sought the aid surreptitiously of the Caped Crusader, so I argue that he is working in tandem with the powers that be, and is not a vigilante. Even in some of the more extreme incarnations, say Frank Miller, Bruce/the Bat is more of a secret agent of the GCPD. Granted, while I am a lifelong lover of Batman, I probably know less about his comic book adventures than many out there, but I throw this pickle in the mix to you, my friend, and want to see if this sways your opinion of the question. As always, thank you for all your hard work here on YouTube and around the web. You're right, a lot of it depends also on the version of Batman you're talking about, because whether we're talking about movies or TV, cartoons, comics, whatever, there have been so many different variations of Batman. And in many of those variations, I think you're right. He is essentially working with the police. He is, for all practical purposes, not a vigilante. In fact, the best example of that is probably in the 1950s and on through the 60s and the 70s even, with the advent of the Comics Code and the desire of the comic book publishers to present wholesome, respectable versions of their superheroes that could not be questioned or challenged as poor role models by parents or by, parents advocates groups. Batman was essentially a cop. I think they basically deputized him. He and Robin were duly deputized officers of the law, even though they dressed in crazy costumes and were not police in any formal sense. They were like deputies. I think that was the case on the Adam West Batman TV show in the 60s, is Batman and Robin were not vigilantes. They were duly deputized officers of the law, and in fact were even publicly known as such. So yeah, you're right. In that version of Batman, totally not a vigilante. And in many other versions of Batman, I think it's a fair point to say that because he is working with the cooperation, albeit usually the very low-key, under-the-radar cooperation of Commissioner Gordon and other agencies of the Gotham City Police Department, that practically speaking, he's not a vigilante. There might be an official policy, like in the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight movies, there's a line that Commissioner Gordon says, where he says, well, the official policy of the GCPD is to arrest Batman on sight. That's the official policy, but that's not what happens. Patrick Dodds. Steve, I must ask, what is your opinion of Back to the Future? Admittedly, your cinematic tastes are more sophisticated than mine, but damn it, this is as close to a perfect film as I've seen, as purposely goofy as it is at times. The editing and the sheer pacing are amazing. Also, I don't think actor Tom Wilson gets enough credit as Biff, a character that's at times a goofy bully, then turns to something truly menacing and evil. So for its 30th anniversary, what's your opinion on Back to the Future and its place in our culture? Also, if you're so inclined, do you have any brief thoughts on the two sequels? God forbid my cinematic tastes ever get so sophisticated that I start thinking I'm too good for Back to the Future. Back to the Future is one of my favorite movies, one of the greatest popcorn movies I think ever made, and one of the great sci-fi comedies ever made. I would put it right up there alongside Ghostbusters in terms of just incredibly successful, enjoyable science fiction comedy films. It's just amazing. It's one of my favorite movies. It's so much fun. It's so clever. It has a wonderful heart. It has a wonderful role for Michael J. Fox. I mean, Michael J. Fox was so successful on TV for so many years as the star of Family Ties. And really, Back to the Future is one of the only films that gives him an appropriate vehicle for his talents. It really allows him to come out and play to his strengths as a film actor. And I mean, Christopher Lloyd is amazing. All the actors, really. Leah Thompson is terrific. As you say, Tom Wilson as Biff is great. Crispin Glover as George is great. It's just a really amazing movie. I think probably Robert Zemeckis' best movie, if you ask me. Zemeckis has done some pretty good movies other than this, but I think the original Back to the Future is still his best work. Just a terrific, terrific movie. I like Back to the Future Part 2. I'm not nuts about it, but it's enjoyable. And I really like Back to the Future Part 3, although I don't like either of the two sequels as much as the first one. Got that funk? Hey Steve, imagine. You wake up one morning and Ashley is gone. Car's still there, nothing seems to be missing. You go to the computer and the internet still works, but there doesn't seem to be anyone out there. Twitter is empty, everything is still online, no activity. Nothing on the television, nothing on the radio. You go into town, you pass no cars, see no human beings at all. But everything still works. Traffic lights, gas stations. So you fill up the car and decide to drive to DC. There is no one anywhere, and no way to know why not. After a few days, everything electrical stops working. What you gonna do? How long would you search before deciding you are on your own? How long would you try to survive on canned goods before you started to go to farms and make do with whatever livestock hadn't starved from lack of human attention? Would there come a point when you decided being alone on Earth was too grim a prospect and decided to top yourself? If so, how would you do it? First of all, I think I would probably hang around in DC for a while. I mean, if the people are just gone, if it's just like everybody sort of was just beamed out and I'm the only person who got left behind. In other words, if the streets are not choked by cars filled with rotting corpses and the sidewalks are not a horror show of decaying dead bodies, it's just everything's just gone. DC would be a pretty fun place to be. You know, I'd have the Air and Space Museum all to myself. It would be pretty cool. Until, of course, the crushing loneliness and the existential dread of what happens next would, close over me and crush me and destroy my spirit. But in the, however long it would take before that happened, I think I'd have a pretty good time. As for would I ever reach the point where I was so depressed or so grief-stricken or so lonely or whatever that I would just decide to kill myself, I don't know. I've never seriously entertained that thought. I've never actually seriously thought, even hypothetically, I've never been able to imagine a scenario where I would think, yeah, if that happened, then I would rather not exist. Existing is big with me. So maybe if I were in that situation and I realized I were all alone and my life was just going to be me sort of contending with my environment for the rest of my life, maybe I might reach that point eventually where I would just say, this is fucking stupid. Why? Let's just rush this along. Why drag this out? Maybe I would feel that way, but it's difficult for me to imagine it now. Even if I were completely alone and there was no other people to talk to, I can't imagine a scenario where I would want to check out before my time. I think even in a world as lonely as that, there would still be so much to do and so many things to discover and just so many things to know and to figure out that I think I would have plenty to keep me busy and keep me occupied. And I dare say maybe even be able to eke out something like a meaningful life, even if the social aspect would be completely absent. I think that would not be impossible. And I would at least want to give it a shot before I topped myself. Aaron Reynolds. Steve, it was inevitable. If YouTube allowed photos, I would attach the picture that I took myself of a church marquee proudly declaring Christian lives matter. Saying Black Lives Matter is not saying other lives don't matter. However, when a society puts so much strain over such a long period of time on an entire ethnic group, it becomes necessary to point out the injustice. Memories last. There are black people alive who went through the civil rights movement. We cannot expect such injustice to be forgiven so quickly. So when black kids are treated differently, when economic disparity persists in black communities, don't be surprised when their frustration boils over. My question is, when will people understand that we don't express the significance of those lives that are not in physical or economic danger? Unfortunately, I think there will probably always be people who don't understand that, no matter how often they have it explained to them, because it is a concept that is very easy to explain. You explained it very well in your question. The reason why people say Black Lives Matter, and that has become a movement and a rallying cry, is because all lives should matter, but for all practical purposes, black lives don't matter, or at least they matter significantly less than white lives, given the way we value them, given the way our society treats them and has treated them throughout history. It's a fairly simple concept to understand. It's the same reason why there are gay pride parades, but straight pride parades would not be appropriate, because straight people are not told that there's anything wrong with them. Our society doesn't tell straight people when they're being brought up that being hetero is anything to be ashamed of, or anything to hide, or anything to be embarrassed about. Nate Tester 555. Steve, what do you think about the slogan, "Religion is a mental illness"? Dick Coughlin made a great Facebook post recently about how saying stuff like that about religion, or anyone who you might disagree with, is insensitive towards those who actually have mental illnesses. Do you also think that it's okay to call certain religious fundamentalists like Pat Robertson and Kent Hovind mentally ill? I'm of the mindset that if you don't have any sort of qualification or evidence to make that sort of statement, then you shouldn't. And it's as unscientific as people playing backseat biologist. You are 100% right, Nate. I absolutely agree. I don't think any of the people who occasionally will float this idea that religion is a mental illness, I don't think any of them are qualified to diagnose someone with mental illness. They're saying religion is a mental illness, as in some sort of clinically diagnosable condition. And that's just wrong. That's just completely wrong. Not only is it disrespectful to people who are actually mentally ill, who are already marginalized enough in our society, but it's disrespectful to religious people. To say that, well, your religion, therefore you must be mentally ill. You believe in a religion, therefore there must be something misfiring in your brain. That's way too easy. Look, I'm an atheist. I don't think that religions are true. I don't think there's any such thing as a true religion. But that doesn't mean that I think you have to be mentally ill in order to be religious. I think it's possible to be wrong, to even be incredibly wrong, and not be mentally ill. And again, I think it's demeaning and derogatory to use the term mentally ill in that way. So yeah, I completely agree with you. Do I think that Pat Robertson or Kent Hovind are mentally ill? No, I don't. Certainly not because of their religious beliefs. I think they're wrong. I think they're ignorant. I think in many cases they are assholes. But I don't think any of those things are indicative of mental illness. Anyway, enough of that. It's time for
the lightning round. Rapid fire questions, glib and adequate answers.
Kevin Logan, why was the guy from the Monster Mash surprised when the monster began to do the Monster Mash? Well, because the creature's brain had been taken from someone who was not an avid dancer. It was just a shock to him, I think. Tendai Manamano, would you ever accept any media recommendations from your viewers? Also, what would you do with a giant robot? Yes, and fight crime. Or possibly charge people for rides. It would depend on how I'm doing. David Landon, did you watch the Democratic debate? Who is your favorite candidate so far and why? What do you consider the most important issues in the upcoming election? I did watch the debate. I thought it was really good, except for Jim Webb crying the whole time about how nobody was paying attention to him. I thought Bernie Sanders did really well. But then again, I thought Hillary Clinton did really well too. I mean, they're the two front runners. You would expect them to do the best. They were the ones that got the most attention from the moderator. And I think they both did very, very well. I still think Hillary is probably the better candidate in terms of winning the election. And that's something that's really important to me. As for what are the most important issues, I think income inequality is a very important issue, and it was nice to hear it discussed during the debate. I think racial justice is a huge issue. And again, it wasn't discussed very much during the debate. I would have liked to have heard that discussed more. Gender equality is very big with me. I think that's something that should be made an issue. I think access to abortions, access to birth control, women's health care in general is something that should be made a priority. Those are just a few. You know, economic justice is probably the biggest one. Fighting poverty, raising the minimum wage, securing and strengthening the social safety net. That's probably, if I had to pick one, that would be the number one most important issue for me. Gentleman in the Radiator. So the obvious question is, what do you think of the two King Kong remakes? Personally, I'm not overly fond of the 1976 one, but I really like Peter Jackson's version. I'm not crazy about either one, but of the two, I prefer the 1976 one because it's less pretentious than the Peter Jackson one, and it's not like 18 fucking hours long. Midnight Shifter, since you're from Maryland, have you ever heard someone claiming that they have seen the Goat Man? I have never actually heard someone claim they personally saw the Goat Man, but I do know what you're talking about when you say the Goat Man. It's one of our local sort of state cryptids. I live very close to West Virginia, and many of my friends throughout my life have been people from West Virginia, and I have known people who have claimed to have encountered the Mothman, which is nuts because the Mothman, like the documented, quote unquote, documented sightings of the Mothman were all like 40 years ago. Like people don't generally see the Mothman anymore. But I've known a few people from West Virginia who swear to God that they saw the Mothman one night. So, Scasis. Hey Steve, you may remember way back when you made your The Hell with 9/11 Truthers video, you were threatened by some with being added to, sinister voice, the list. Out of curiosity, did you in fact ever get added to the list? I don't know, because I never followed up on that, because I didn't give a shit about it back then, and I don't give a shit about it now. Ahoyerno, so when it comes to the gun problem, would you repeal the Second Amendment if you could? Yes, I would repeal the Second Amendment if I could. If I could wave a magic wand, I would repeal the Second Amendment. Jack McMorrow, based on that one episode of Star Trek DS9, I'm thinking of further embracing American sport by getting into baseball. What would you, as a huge fan, recommend to get me started? Oh, Jack, it's the perfect time of year because we're almost to the World Series. If you want to get into baseball and you want to just dive into the deep end with both feet, you should watch the World Series this year. And if you're not up on who the teams are, if you're not, in a place where you can have a really strong rooting interest for either side, that's okay. Just watch the games and enjoy them in their own right. Enjoy them for the drama and the excitement and the just the World Series-iness of it. I would recommend that you watch the World Series. I would also recommend, and I know I assume you're not here in the United States. You live elsewhere. So it might be difficult for you, but if at all possible, at some point in your journey as a baseball fan, you should try to go see a baseball game live. That is the best way to watch baseball. And I'm not just talking about necessarily a major league game, or even a minor league game, or even a professional game. If you're a real baseball fan and you get to a point where you have like a natural appreciation for it, going to see like a little league game, or a softball game in some kind of weekend softball league can be just as rewarding and just as exciting and fun as a professional major league level baseball game. So that's what I would recommend. Watch the World Series this year, just see how you like it, and at some point, if possible, go see live games because That's the way to go. Hey, that's it for the questions, everybody. Before I get out of here, I'm going to give a shout out to a worthy recipient. And pay attention, because the shout out this time is a little different than the typical one. Yes, it is a YouTube channel, but it is a YouTube channel created for a specific event. And that event is the first ever Atheists of Facebook online convention. If you go to the Atheists of Facebook YouTube channel right now, you can watch the trailer, essentially, for the Atheists of Facebook convention, where you can see many of the scheduled speakers talk about who they are and what they're going to talk about during their time at the convention. What this is an online convention where people from all over the world who are atheists on Facebook, who are not very well-known, notable figures in the atheist community, but who have accumulated decently large followings on Facebook by making statements in support of atheism, sharing atheist memes, sharing atheist videos, expressing opinions and viewpoints from an atheist perspective. They're getting together to hold an online, like a virtual convention. And I think this is such a great idea. And if you want to watch the online atheist convention, if you want to attend, it will be held November 7th from 11 a.m. Eastern to 10 p.m. Eastern. And it will be held online. And if you want to know more information, check the description box of this video, because I'll have a link to the Facebook event page that you can go to. In addition to the YouTube channel where you can watch the trailer, you can actually go to the Facebook event page and signify that you will be attending, so you won't forget about it. If you watch the trailer, you can get a sense of what a lot of them are going to be talking about. A diverse array of issues that should be of interest and relevance to many of us in the atheist community. And it's just a fantastic idea, and I can't wait to watch it myself. So November 7th, starting at 11 a.m. Eastern, the Atheists of Facebook online convention. Mark your calendar, and I highly recommend that you check it out. And I'm going to remind you about it in a couple of weeks, just in case you forget. I also want to remind you, as I always do, to check out the Lemme Listen podcasts. These are podcasts created by the brilliant yet somewhat demented mind, he won't mind me saying that, of Jason Harding, the creator of Opinionville here on YouTube, which is a channel that you should totally subscribe to. There are 3 podcasts in the Lemme Listen family. There's Lemme Finish, which is hosted by Jason and Atticus Blake, aka Finite Atticus, which is hilarious. There is American Monsters and How to Destroy Them, a wonderful, brilliantly funny improv comedy podcast that is like a cross between Coast to Coast AM and Twin Peaks. I cannot recommend that one highly enough. And then there is Late Seating, which is a movie review podcast, which Jason hosts with me. We have a new episode going up every 2 weeks. We talk about classic movies, noteworthy movies. We give them a fresh watch and a fresh review and talk about whether or not we think these classic films deserve, in our estimation, to be considered classics. It's such a fun show to do. Hopefully you guys can give it a listen and see if you like it. Our most recent review is up right now. It went up last week. It's of the sci-fi horror classic Alien. If you haven't listened to that one yet, check it out. It's a really fun show. And next week will be our next new episode, which will feature another horror movie with kind of a Halloween theme. So look for that. And you can listen to all of them at LemmeListenPodcasts.com. And I highly recommend that you do. Well, that's it for me this week, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. I remind you, as always, to please leave a comment on this video asking me your question for next time. You can ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious, nothing is too silly, and I will answer as many of your questions as I possibly can in the next video. So until the next video, thank you for watching, and take care, everybody.